Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar on what doesn't kill you may leave a scar. This webinar is organized by Law Society Pro Bono Services. I am Sadhana and I am your host for today. Please note that the discussion in this webinar is not intended to constitute professional, legal, or medical advice. You should consult a lawyer or medical professional if you require specific legal or medical aid. I would now like to poll the audience. This will give the panelists an indication of what you wish to learn today. The first poll, which of the following most closely represents why you are here today? You may select one of the following. I want to know more about how to craft a balanced lifestyle. I'm burnt out and I'm considering leaving the legal industry. I have left the legal industry and I'm from another industry. The second question, what is the most important thing you look for in your job? Work-life balance, sense of purpose, money, or intellectual growth? So the most popular answer for which of the following closely represents why you're here today, the most popular answer is people want to know more about how to craft a balanced lifestyle. And the second most popular answer is that people are burnt out and they are considering leaving the legal industry. So I think this talk will be very helpful for you because you're dealing with two very experienced practitioners who've been in the industry for more than 30 years. The second question, if I could just have that brought up again. What is the most important thing you look for in your job? Actually, it's fairly evenly spread. We have 38 people who have told us that they're looking for work-life balance. That's something that I think most of us are looking for. And about 62% have also told us that they are looking for a sense of purpose. And I think that's something that I personally am searching for as well, because your job needs to mean something to you. Financial stability, intellectual growth, fairly even sense of interest there. And I think we will be addressing all of these things as we move on to introduce our two panelists for today. The first person I'm more than happy to introduce is Stefanie Yuen-Thio. Now, I feel like I don't really need to introduce Stefanie. I mean, she is everywhere. You'll see her on LinkedIn, you'll see her on Tatler Asia, Legal 500 Asia Pacific, Legal Who's Who, Chambers Asia Pacific. Officially, she's the joint managing partner and head of TSMP's transactional practice, and I'm sure everyone has heard of her. But I've had the honor of getting to know her a little bit more on a different side of her. There is so much more to this woman beyond 30 years of practice. She's a mother, a photography enthusiast, a traveler, a writer for Business Times. She sits on the board for the Community Foundation of Singapore. She's traveled with Smile Asia on missions to provide cleft operations for needy children. All I can say about Steph is that she is larger than life, and really the most accurate description about her is unapologetically Stefanie. The next panelist I'm glad to introduce to all of you today is Dirk. Dirk was admitted to practice in Western Australia in 1992 and is also admitted to the High Court and the Federal Courts. He was made partner in 1995 and has run his own boutique firm since 1998. During his career, Dirk has represented thousands of clients across a wide range of commercial matters. He's been involved as a litigator in various cases, particularly in the superior courts, as well as cross-border litigation, at times drawing on his native language, being German. What you didn't know about Dirk, and you probably won't find this online because he is a bit of a mystery man, is that he has a degree in history. He too is a traveler and an avid photographer. He loves watches and cars. And to top it off, and this is my personal favorite, he used to be a women's self-defense instructor. Stefanie and Dirk, thank you so much for joining us today.
Lovely to be here, Sadhana. I'd like to point out, though, that in that quick introduction, you managed to call me old and large. So thank you very much. I'm coming for you. Hi, Dirk. Good to be on with you.
I'm very accepting of my age, and I don't mind. I've been around for a long time, but indeed I've had an interesting and varied life, and I hope that some of these perspectives contribute to the discussion today.
I'm looking forward to it. Now, gentle reminder to our audience, you can send in your questions using the Q&A icon at any point, and we will try to field them during the course of the discussion. Now, I want to take us very quickly to the very first point that we wanted to talk about, your journey as a lawyer. Let's start from the start. Why did you become a lawyer? Steph, could you tell us?
Oh, my early life was all a series of what I couldn't do. I wasn't clever enough to be in medicine. I didn't know any math, so I couldn't be an architect or an engineer. It was really down to, you've got the gift of the gap, you better do what you can there. And then once you get a law degree, back in my day, you really didn't have very many options. You could go in-house or you could become a lawyer. So that's what I did. I think the sense of purpose changed along the way though. You do what you have to do, and then after a little while you ask yourself, is this really what I want to be doing? And I realized that I could do more with what I had been given. So earlier on, when you guys were polled and you said you wanted work-life balance, I have something to say about that. Work-life balance is for wimps, okay? I believe that you can have it all and do it all, and you can be that person. So I would rather than say, I want to split my life into different boxes, I would say, do everything that you want to do because you can. Not maybe all at the same time, not at the same moment, just like you can't have chocolate cake and a steak at exactly the same moment, but you can have them both in your meal. And food is a very important part of my life, as you can see, which is why Sadhana called me larger than life. But I really do believe that is the case. So along the way, I stuck in the law. Some of the decisions I didn't really felt I had. My mother-in-law started this law firm 20-something years ago. She said, come and help me. And you know, when you go into the family business, you don't really have a choice but to stay on. And then after a little while, you stay on because there are people whose livelihoods depend on you. And then there was a sense of purpose. I had a duty and an obligation to make sure that, you know, everybody enjoyed their work here. They got the best work that they could. They had entrusted a part of their career to us, and we had to honor that trust. So that was something that we needed to do. Then along the way, I started getting involved in a lot more charity work, and that is stuff that you can only do when you are gainfully employed on your own. You also find that you have more credibility to raise funds or to do the work that you're doing if you are a lawyer, and I found that actually served that purpose, so that made sense for me as well. But along the way, I had a lot of chances to have fun. I managed to curate a world that I enjoyed. So whether it's in designing the office, which, you know, we moved into new offices, I redesigned it. Whether it's in crafting your own way of travel, which I do, I enjoy that extensively. I started taking up photography, which I really enjoy as well. I like writing, so I went back to the written word. I write stuff that I enjoy writing. And I just got involved in stuff that I enjoyed doing. And I believe you can do that. And I don't think you have to choose, do I want to be a lawyer or photographer? Because I think you can be both. And in today's day and age, we really have the optionality to do a lot more. And that's what I would say. But I'd love to hear from Dirk, actually. What's your journey, Dirk?
Well, my journey started somewhat unremarkably because I actually did rather well in photography, and I told my mother about it, and she went, that's a wonderful idea, don't even think about it and you'll be a lawyer. So I did what a lot of children do, and I was a good boy, and I went to law school, and this was in Canberra. Ultimately we ended up in Perth, and I was very fortunate to get a lovely job here in Perth. I then moved to a smaller firm, and really I've had 2 jobs in the law. I probably have a slightly different perspective on the you can do it all. I think I feel that there is, that the term work-life balance is wasted. The idea is that it's all life, and life has compartments. And part of this might be my very clinical German brain, where I go, look, this is work, and work is work. Then you have family life, then you have personal life, you have your interests, and you need to have some compartmentalization just to make sure you can immerse yourself with the appropriate degree of attention. So one thing I wanted to be was a present parent. I was a present parent. The other thing I wanted to be was a traveler. So I made sure I ended up with a practice that gave me the opportunity to get on a plane, get out and do things. And I've really seen much of the world in the process, and generally saw it anyway. So I've had I guess, quite a structured approach to things. I decided reasonably early in my life that having done the long days, 6-7 days a week, all of that, and I built the firm substantially to a substantially larger firm at one point in time. But really what I wanted was a certain degree of revenue, a certain degree of income, and that I also wanted to have access to the time that I wanted to pursue my interests. And I've started cultivating practices around that, including making sure that I would finish my work on a Friday afternoon. So part of it was a discipline of the mind to make sure there were no unanswered emails. So I would go through my email folder from the bottom up, and I would eradicate all emails, deal with them, bin what was junk and stuff you didn't need to deal with, file what had to be filed with, return my phone call so I could go into a weekend with a relatively uncluttered mind, and then dedicate myself to the things that I wanted to dedicate myself to. I will say, I guess, that I do have a perception that law can be very tough. It can be very lonely for people. I haven't had partners. I've done most of it on my own. Now I'm a reasonably pig-headed person, and I will get to where I'd like to be usually. That can work for you, that can work against you if you're not well. There are complexities in life that I think I've learned about and I've perceived, and in fact it gave rise to this talk when Adrian Tan and I were chatting on LinkedIn, and he made a very good comment about the special issues family lawyers confront. And I butted in and I said, well, one of the issues to deal with is, for instance, clients who have mental health problems. And really things grew from there. So in a very long-winded way, that's how I started in law. There's some perspectives on legal practice. Back to the moderator.
The thing that I take away from that, really, from the two different perspectives, is they're not actually very different. To both of you.
Describe the same thing, except one from the scientist's perspective and one from the artist's perspective.
Exactly. So to both of you, work does consume quite a bit of your life. And I think you approach it very differently. You view it very differently. From Dirk's perspective, which I sometimes do, I try and finish my work, and I don't let it consume me, and I have firm deadlines. And I think it's what we call boundaries. We try and draw clear boundaries for ourselves to make sure that at the very least we take that time off to sort of decompress from work. I think from Steph's perspective, you do it a bit differently. You do take the time to decompress. You take a bit more time to sort of process and get the work done. And I also think you enjoy the work a little bit more because you view it a little differently. Not that you enjoy it more than Dirk, of course. I'm sure Dirk enjoys his work as well, but I think your perception of work is a bit different. I've been in both situations, and I must say I see a little bit of myself, in both of you, or rather I see a little bit of you in me, The thing that I struggle with a lot is that work tends to be all-consuming, and it tends to make me lose sight of some of the more important things of my life, because when there are pressing deadlines, when there are things that are due, you don't really pay attention to the other small things, and before you know it, 10 years has passed, and you're kind of stuck with this daily routine. You have health problems, you haven't really focused on your life. So do you have any advice for people who are struggling with these types of things?
Sada, I would say, I think it's really important to own your whole life and every minute. I think it's important to spend it meaningfully. I think part of the problem of this generation is we have too much instant gratification. We have too many calls on our time. And I think the idea of enjoy yourself is too much an impetus. I think you get joy out of a sense of meaning and a sense of fulfillment, a sense of purpose. How do you make time for all that? I sort of see my life as one big life, and it has to fit everything inside it. I'm very conscious of my own wellness, whether it's my physical wellness or my mental wellness, and we can talk a little bit about that because I think it's an increasing issue. But I also believe that I've always made time. So I have one son, he's 23 soon. He's always been a priority for me, although he probably will disagree with that if you were to ask him. He's a priority. My family is a priority. My marriage has always been a priority for me. Family obligations. You just make time for those things. You make time to sleep. There are times when you say, I'm going to turn off the damn phone because I need to sleep because I'm no good to anybody if I don't get enough rest. I think it's about owning that. I think it's about having the courage to say to your boss or your teammates, my best friend's getting married this weekend. I need to go and be, a maid of honor at their wedding for the next 3 days. Unless, somebody's died, I really need to be off the grid. Can you please look after me and cover me? And I think you should curate your life with people who will support you. All right. Don't go and work in a place which says, this time is my time, it belongs to me. You need to be at a place which says, we know you put in more than what you're contractually required to do. We appreciate that. There will be times when you need to call on us. We will be there for you. I think that that's very important. It's about curating, and I think control, being able to control the different aspects of your life is very important. And whether that's the compartmentalization skill that Dirk talked about, or whether it's just finding the time, I think that that's critical. Talking a little bit about mental wellness, and I don't know whether we're jumping ahead. I think that that's important, and that's an increasingly important thing. I don't think that just as if I had the flu, I'd go and see a doctor. If I broke my leg, I'd go and see a surgeon. If I don't feel that my head is in the right space, I would go and look for the right kind of help I needed to do that. And it's not something to be ashamed of. I've gone through tough times in my life when a very strong woman friend of mine said to me, Steph, go and see my friend who's a counselor. And I went, I don't need that. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not psychiatrically in a problem area. And she said, it will help you. It will help you to process. So I did. I went to see a counselor for a few months. I went to see her once every 2-3 weeks, and then it tailed off to once every few months. It helped me to process. I think that also is owning the problem and owning the solution to the problem.
Dirk, could I get your perspective on this? Because I'm sure, in terms of dealing with some of the pressures of running your own practice, you would have experienced some of the problems I'm talking about, the problems with management.
Absolutely. And I think the basic problem is one of a necessary image we have to project, which is quite one-dimensional. And I'll say that even listening to Stefanie now, if you go powerful lawyer, owner of law firm, listening to Stefanie, you get a flavor of the more diverse dimensions to her life and the pressures that pull on all of us. I felt very strongly about the opportunity to be part of this particular conversation because the very restricted view people form of our profession can also be quite harmful to us, and the idea, the projection of what we need to live. Now, the first point I want to make is that when I was admitted, the Supreme Court would always have a short address to the recent practitioners that were admitted, and one of the lines in it was that this is a profession and not a business. And then it sort of over the years went to it's not just a business, and then various judges have used degrees of that. But this is law. Law is not a business, not just a business for sure. And you cannot be an effective lawyer, in my view, unless you are a heart and soul person. That means your mind knows how to get into a matter and stay in there, because we are paid good money to find the stuff and assess the risk and research things and find evidence that may not be obvious to other people. We actually are people who have the aptitude, but also the trained skill to be something that most people can't be. Now, that might sound arrogant, and I live with that, but what it really means is that we perform at a very high level, and that takes its toll. And you take any form of machinery anywhere, whether it's a car or your in the old days, your typewriter, your laptop, your printer, whatever it is, you drive it too hard and don't maintain it, it will break. It's as simple as that. And to say that, or to think that lawyers will perform otherwise is simply wrong. So, little article I saw in the Lancet in terms of just the cost of mental health to the world economy. These are figures from the World Health Organization. by 2030, it is $6 trillion. Whether it's burnout, heart attacks, strokes, all these sorts of things that actually cause a substantial loss in our workforce and are also a significant part of the attrition in law. And I think we can do better. And, you know, it is a tremendous privilege. I mean, I'm a nobody to all of you, but it's a tremendous privilege to well, speak to you, Sadhana, of course, and to have somebody like Stefanie on board with her high profile. Because it opens up, sometimes we do things by way of tokenism, you know, we go, let's resolve to have this and let's resolve to have that. But it opens up a conversation and hopefully make an honesty about these issues accessible to people who would otherwise feel that, well, I can't talk about it. I have nobody I can talk to. My workplace is horrible. The people I work with are horrible. My boss is horrible. My secretary is horrible, whatever it is. And that they can go, I feel terrible. I'm not happy. And I don't mean happy in the la-la sense. I don't mean happy in the, you skip out of your house every morning and you know, skip down the road and sing a song and hold hands with every person in the world. I mean happy in the sense of functioning. I mean happy in the sense of just coping. And there are important things and strategies. Look, I'm not an expert, but I've had some experiences and I'm happy to talk about things to a point. I didn't bring my medical records, but I'm happy to talk to things to a point. But I feel having this conversation, hopefully, will benefit in particular younger practitioners who might be at the doorstep of the profession, having spent years being trained, being an asset to the society, maybe going, I don't want to do this anymore. And that would be a tragedy.
I just wanted to unpack two things that stuck out to me, you know, in what both of you have shared. The first is really this performance-driven culture that the law profession is. As a kid, when you go to school, you're told you need to get the grades, you need to do your best, you know, do well in your PSLE, you do go to a good secondary school, you do well for your O levels, you'll go to a good junior college, you know, and so this performance-driven culture is really ingrained in us since we were kids. And I found that law is one of the most performance-driven occupations, you know, across the board, you know, and really it's because if you don't perform or you don't get the outcome you want, your clients are not going to be happy, your bosses are not going to be happy, you know, and so much hangs on the performance of the lawyer, such that it is really, really difficult, especially you know, when as a younger lawyer, to communicate to, you know, the senior on the file or your boss that, look, I really need a break, I can't do it, because there are deadlines. You know, if I don't give you this draft by this date, you're not going to be able to review it by this date, and we're not going to be able to file it by this date. And you will think I'm sloppy or I'm inefficient or I'm ineffective. And if I give you the draft in the state that it is because I can't finish it, it's just going to reflect badly on me. And so these thoughts constantly play on the mind of lawyers, especially in this age where things move so fast. I suppose in the past, I mean, I can't speak for what happened in the past, but I truly believe things were a lot slower, you know, in terms of filing, because, you know, in the instant digital age, you can send an email with the click of a button. People across the world can communicate, you know, at the click of a button and request you to do things. But I think in the past, when things were slower, there's a bit more breathing space. You send a letter and, you know, it'll take 2 days to get there, and it'll take a week for them to reply. And you have 1 week breathing space to go to the library, pull out a book and research. Now, research is expected to be turned out overnight because you have access to, you know, digital platforms to do so. And while I'm most appreciative of developments in technology, it's also caused immense strain in a performance-driven culture. So I'm just wondering, let's start with Stefanie. You told us that we should be able to communicate with, our bosses, our colleagues about the stresses that we're facing. But how do we do that within this culture?
A few points first. I think the performance-driven culture that you've talked about is very real, and it's actually worse than what you've described. And the reason it's worse is because we're lawyers. We're paid to get it right, right? But we're not paid to try. Nobody pays you to try your best. Nobody pays you to show up, okay? We're paid to get it right. You maybe to get the result that your client wants, me to get the document and not screw it up, okay? Not to put the wrong things in, not to miss a point. So that's the stressor. For me, the stressor has always been we're paid for some version of perfection, and anything else is going to fall short. But I'm a human being. I'm always going to be imperfect. How do I reconcile that? But for me, that was the difficulty. Secondly, your generation keeps talking about how my generation had it much better in terms of timing. It's not quite that way. You guys can do research with the click of a button. You can do a word search. We used to have to pull out the actual books and look for that particular. So the process took its own form of timing. Now you can send an email to 20 people with one click. I used to stand at the fax machine and punch in each person's number. Okay, and I have to wait for the 2 hours it would take for the fax to go out before I could go home for the evening. Because in case anything didn't go through, I'd have to send it again. So different things that took up time. But I appreciate your point. Right now, more things are coming at you. Last time I could sit there for 2 hours and wait and say, oh my God, I gotta wait for the fax machine. But at least my brain was zoned out, right? Now you're like, the email comes in immediately. You haven't amended this clause, please send it out again. So I appreciate it. I agree with the point generally. What I would say to the younger people who are just joining the profession is what life is in your first year is not the same as what it's going to be in your 5th year or in your 15th year. Okay. In your first year, it's going to be a lot of very boring, repetitive stuff. Some of that is just learning and getting the muscle memory in to get good at something. See that as the learning in time, as the time that it takes to perfect the stroke. All right, perfect the craft. Then in your 5th, 6th year, it's going to be you're going to be balancing the challenges of being a really great associate, so getting a really good product, at the same time learning to deal with some leadership, because you're going to be working with young associates. And a lot of my mid-level associates say, you know, Steph, when we were younger, we thought you were such a tough boss, and now we find ourselves complaining about the junior associates in the same way that you used to complain about us. Why can't they do this, right, etc. So I think there's a learning curve. It's a different set of challenges. And then everybody thinks as a partner, you can do what you like, but you can't, because ultimately you're the first person that the client calls. And you're the person that everybody calls when the shit has hit the fan, right? When you screwed up the file, you're going to be the one who's going to have to take it down. When somebody needs a commercially creative solution, you're the one who's going to have to come up with that on the spur of the moment. Steph, how do we deal with this? It's a different set of challenges. I like new challenges, so I like that it's new. I would say don't imagine that every day of your life is going to be the way it was today. That's the first thing. 2, own your life. So pick a place where you like to work. A friend of the firm, Nick Poon, he's a top lawyer. I'm sure you know him, Sadhana. So he's a top litigator. He started up his own firm because he wanted a little bit more. He wanted a little bit more time. And now I understand he's going to be following his wife because she's being sent abroad for her job, and he's going to be looking after his twins. He's going to be a stay-at-home dad. I have so much respect for that. I don't feel that that makes him less of a man or less of a professional. That's just the path his life is taking currently. Okay, I'm sure he'll come back and still be at the top of his profession. So that's great. I think it's really important to curate what you want. And then I think you need to communicate that. And if you're not working in a place which allows you to do that, then you need to think about, is this really where I want to work? And there's some small firms, you could join up with your friends and start something that you really enjoy. Yeah, the money may not be as good as working in, I don't know, the witnessing chambers, but money may not be as good as, you know, something like that, but you get to choose. It's never going to be, you're never going to be living hand to mouth in the law. I think you need to choose for yourself what you want, but then once you own it, then it becomes your own. And I kind of enjoy that. If I wanted to make a lot of money, I would go to an international firm, but I wouldn't enjoy it because it wouldn't allow me to be all the versions of myself that I enjoy. So I like it here. And then you do the best that you can where you are. So I think that ownership, that sense of control is really important. The other thing that we do with our associates, which I think is important, I know that as an associate, you cannot tell what the timelines are looking like because it may be the first time you're working on this sort of a file. You don't know when the client's likely to call you. So I think it's important. What we do is we sit down and we'll have a conversation. Okay, the following week, it's likely to be really busy in the second week of May. Okay, that's when the filing deadlines are due. I'm going to need drafts 2 weeks before that. Those are going to be the crunch times. So that everybody knows. And then we might say, okay, so this weekend, even if you have other backlog, can you promise me that you're going to take 6 hours or 8 hours off during which we all agree we're not going to contact one another. We just have some time to ourselves and enjoy ourselves. Very often the associates will say, sorry, I need my Sunday afternoon because that's my family lunch. And then we'll say, okay, fine, that's the time that we won't disturb you. And even if emails come in, don't worry, I'm on top of it. I think you need to work in a team that does that, because we all know what the pressures are like. And from your boss's perspective, don't be scared of saying this, because what your bosses and your seniors like to see are junior lawyers having this kind of ownership mentality. Because if they're going to have an ownership mentality about their life and their time, they're going to have an ownership mentality about the file, about the brief. And I think that that's really important. Yeah.
No, I was about to say you're going to get a lot of applications to your law firm, because
I mean, the hours are punishing. Let's not pretend that that isn't the case. You know, and when we first moved office, I spent a lot of time buying instant noodles, and I was told that it's very important to get the right sort of instant noodles because millennials are very, very hooked on this sort of the right sort of instant noodles. So we do that, but it's because people have to work really, really late. Last night, somebody brought out a really large jar of Nutella, and we all sat there and ate Nutella and from, you know, eating on bread that one of my male partners had baked. So it's a good community, and I think what's more important is to have a good community to work with, rather than say, I mean, I would hate a job which allowed me to leave at 6 on the dot every day, where I didn't feel that I belonged.
I want to hear from Dirk as well.
Yes.
So Dirk, can you tell us what is the best way that we can communicate these things, you know, in light of all of the pressures that we are facing, the impression that we're trying to leave? What do you think is the best way we can communicate these needs?
Well, let me just say something about how I see the law, and make a maybe bold statement about what we are not. And what we are not is magicians. The worst thing that happened to me in my life, and I've spent most of my life doing advocacy and working as a litigator, was winning my first trial. And I literally walked out, my head was about this size, and I felt as invincible as I felt walking in. And I thought, you've got this, because all you need to do is work your rear end off, research what you need to research, have your file in top shape, have your witnesses lined up, and what can go wrong. And as you learn later in litigation, you can have everything absolutely sparkling neat. You can have the most beautifully submissions in the world, or you think you do. You can be perfectly prepared, and for whatever reason, the result doesn't come through. And so I want to make that as a statement, because again, in a curated world and in a world of suits, I think, Sadhana, in the lead up to this, you expressed your fondness for the show, which I must say I don't think much of, for reasons I'll explain in a minute. We should have quite an honest discussion about expectations that clients bring into the equation, and expectation management about time, turnover, and so forth, because a client will take from you whatever inch that you will give, even beyond the reasonable or the doable. And I have always taken a lot of pride in having a high volume or capacity for packing things into a day, for meeting deadlines. When I was a uni student, I lived by a simple rule: if it's due on Monday, complete it the Friday before. And then if you fall foul of that, you've got Saturday and Sunday to sort it out. But I never, not once, sat in the library on a Monday, 5 minutes before the deadline, writing away. In our days, we used to write. Now, I'm really glad Stefanie made a point about the way it used to be, because there is a myth. The myth is that we all sat on a stack of dusty old books with a quill and a little light, maybe oil if it was an advanced firm, maybe just a candle, and we would sort of scratch away from there.
You mean that's not how it was done?
Okay, brace yourselves. It's going to be bad news for all of those that thought that. Well, I mean, Stefanie is obviously much younger than I am, but that is how it used to be. I have seen a telex in action. So that's how old I am, how long I've been around. It was a big chunky thing. It used to go tuk, 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 tuk across. Not recommended, but we used to have fax wars. And we were far more reliant on people than we are now. I had 23 people once, and it was probably, I always felt, was the low point in my career. People go, look at how successful you are and how much you're growing and so forth. Because all I'd spend all day, apart from running a really busy practice, is managing people. And so how do you feel today? And really, did that happen? And, you know, you try and bring a level of care to it, but then you keep giving from yourself in order to make things happen. That said, I have tried, and others must judge me, to be a good mentor to staff. I think at the end of the day, for the first 10 years of your legal practice, you're reasonably useless. And no matter how much you think you know, there are just reflexes and things that are not built in. The research has become easier. That said, information has become more accessible. I'm not sure if the quality of research on the part of legal practitioners has actually improved, because there seems to be a lot more cut and paste. And very few people read a decision from beginning to end. And I was counsel on an appeal once, and as opposing counsel, who was senior counsel, walked in, he gave me a case, as is the courtesy before a hearing if you haven't put it in your written submissions. He says, I'm very sorry, I will be referring to this in the course of the hearing. So that was a surprise, but it was a reasonably short case. He got up, he made a submission, he looked at a paragraph, he quoted from the paragraph, and I kept on reading. And then he sat down, and then I stood up and I went to that case only, to the second paragraph that he didn't refer to, and we won the appeal on that point. And the idea is you've really got to read. Law is particularly detail driven, and where law becomes terrifying for practitioners is that if you get it wrong, it's in writing. You know, it's not like you can draft a bad contract and turn your back and go, that didn't happen. It's there in black and white, and everybody can see it. If you don't prepare something, people will know. It's simply the way it is.
No, we're trying to get young people to feel good about the profession, and all you've just said, I'm now getting very depressed.
You know, I'll say this. I think we maybe as a profession to improve the retention rate, because it's a little bit, look, when my daughter had her tonsils out when she was little, my wife told her that she was going to go to the hospital and get a lot of presents. So she was tiny and she walked through the hospital going, I'm here to get some presents. I'm here to get some presents. Hello, I'm here to get some presents. And I'll never forget her face when she woke up from the anesthetic, and it wasn't a happy face. I think the problem is this: you really want to moderate the expectations about what the job is, because we should focus on what we're really, really good at. One, we have the capacity to do this job, and that's a wonderful thing. And stepping back from all, whether you work in a smaller firm and not make so much money or in a large firm stuff, we actually do hold the social fabric together. Without our profession, there is no commerce, because if the deals go wrong, you are stuck to picking up a club and trying to fight somebody, and then whoever walks away will win. We are the people that will achieve reasonable outcomes and regulate things to the point where, with some dissatisfaction for some, things function. And that should not be forgotten. And I think people need to go back and actually look at what law does and have a sense of pride, because it won't be beautiful. It won't always produce money. It won't always reward you with a victory, but it should reward your soul and your constitution by knowing you've made a difference. I think doctors get that sense. You know, with a doctor, they save a patient and they go, wow, that's amazing. But then they also lose many. You know, if you're in emergency, you will lose a number of people. They just stay dead on the table and you've done everything. Law is a little bit like that. That shouldn't put you off, because the nobility of what you do, and that's a big word, by the way, and a loaded word, shouldn't be lost. I think when people say we are paid to get it right, I think, of course, there is a standard by which we have to perform, which we mustn't fall below. But there's simply a level we can't achieve. And having an honest conversation with junior practitioners going, guys, you're going to stuff up, is really important, because if they continuously have that fear of failure, they're going to go, you know what? I go to work every day. My boss looks like he or she's going to kill me. I'm earning this, that's great, but it's not about the money. And I'm sick of having a conversation with my parents about what I need to pursue. I'm going to open a yoga studio. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we're losing people, and that's not right.
I think, Dirk, you've made such an important point, because the perspective that you're sharing now is something that as a young practitioner, we don't tend to see, especially in high stress, high impact situations. For example, if you have a submission before the Court of Appeal the following week and you're the young lawyer that's doing it, you're not going to be thinking about all of these, things about, calming yourself down. It's okay. What's the worst that could happen? No, most people don't think that. Most people think, what if I make a mistake? And as you said, it goes on record. It goes in a written judgment. The court, the Chief Justice, who I'm the biggest fan of, scolds me, and it's written there. That kind of overwhelms you. And I just wanted to share, as someone who has gone through this process before, I think, Steph, you mentioned earlier about seeking help. I think that's such an important point. I want to come back to that in a bit. But at an early stage in my career, I was called to the bar in 2013. I became a lawyer then. I felt overwhelmed by just the work that I was doing. And in 4 years, I was burnt out. I needed to talk to someone, and I've been seeking professional, counseling since then for the past 5-6 years. And the thing that I find myself repeating very often, especially in very stressful situations, is that I am okay. Even if the situation is stressful, even if there are deadlines, what's the worst that could happen? I am alive, I am well, I have family, I have people who love and care for me, and I am okay. And I think that really takes away from, or gives you perspective on the situation, that work can be life, and it is life for me. I love my job. I'm working in the best environment. I love my boss is watching this. I love you, but the reality is it cannot take away from you what you are, which is, I am Sadhana, you are Stefanie, you are Dirk, and that doesn't change despite your failures or successes. And I think when you get that perspective, it's so important, because then it really changes your perspective on life, on work, on stress, on challenges that you're facing. It doesn't take away from who you are. I really love that perspective that you shared. What I really want to go into now is some of the challenges that both of you face on a daily basis, even after 30 years in practice. I'm sure it's not, you don't have it down to a pad. It's not all smooth sailing. Maybe we can start with Steph. Can you tell us what are some of the challenges that you still face on a daily basis?
I have very, very deep imposter syndrome, and that affects every aspect of my life. I'm a glass half full person. I always sort of think the worst is going to happen now. If I've had a good run, it'll be, oh my God, when the shoe drops, it's going to be even worse, because there are some people who are lucky in life, who have smooth sailing, and we all know those people. They had boyfriends and girlfriends early on, and they never had acne. Those people, you hate them. And even if you go through 30 years of your life without acne anymore, you're the person with acne, all right, in your head. I deal with that. I deal with, even today, I just walked into one of my associates' rooms and I went, I forgot to breathe today. I'm having difficulty now breathing because I've been forgetting to draw breath because there's so much on my hands. I think the weight of responsibility is very, very strong on me, that so many people, as the firm gets bigger and more successful, there are more people that you have to balance the interests of and you have to look after. There are more things that you have to do. You constantly feel that you're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. And, in this case, Peter's my son, whom I haven't given enough time to. My work, I haven't spent enough time on. How come the other lawyers are so much better than I am? There is this great sense of failure. A little bit of fear of failure is a good thing, because it means that it keeps you honest. Too much of it can cripple you. So that permeates every aspect of my life. I need to do what you've just said, which is to remind myself that I am not the sum total of those fears. Okay, that I am worth something, that even if I'm a useless, terrible person, I can do something good for somebody today. So I make a really big point of small things. When I go to a hawker center, I will slip $50 to the cleaner because they're clearing tables and there's a thankless task, and auntie's bent over and she's 70 years old and she's a day. I try to sort of think, if God has given me the ability to do this job and make some money, it's my duty to pass some of that blessing on. So I try to make that a bit of a mantra. Let me try to end the day a slightly better version of myself than the way I started. I don't always succeed, but that's what I try and do. I try to live life with a little bit of purpose, because if I had to live it for myself because I felt that I deserved anything, I wouldn't, because I just don't you don't feel that you're that person who deserves good things, right? So you try to live with a little bit of meaning that's outside yourself. And that's what I meant when I talked about purpose earlier on.
When I was a junior practitioner, I attended 2 talks that I think have stayed with me. The first one was by somebody who was like a business consultant, and he said something along the lines of, if you're doing anything and you feel it wastes your time, get up and leave. And I kid you not, the sooner he said it, half the room walked out. And I went, firstly, first lesson from that, think about what you say and who your audience is. But yes, you're right, because if it wastes your time, don't do it. The other talk I went to was from a senior counsel called Bart Kukulis, who was the preeminent personal injury silk in our state and highly sought after. And he gave a talk about his journey. And in a world of one-dimensional, look at me, he was a character who said, look at me. I did it the hard way. I didn't back myself. You know, I had doubts. I'm human. I failed. And he gave us a talk about the humanity that is he and all the complexities. And, you know, when you hear a preeminent lawyer like Stefanie open up and talk about what she called impostor syndrome, which is the self-doubt that we all have. So we all have this persona that we can go through steel walls. And for many of the people who've been on the other side of us, hopefully that will be their memory. But we are not that person. And we shouldn't be defined by that. Another conversation I've had once was with a psychologist who said something really important to me that I've hopefully communicated now to as many other people as I can, and I'm pleased to have this forum, and that is that anyone by the time they're 21 should have a full debrief through a psychologist. He goes, the hardest thing you'll do in life is be a teenager. And he goes, you know, you talk about, I mean, you want to talk about performance anxiety. You're not a fish nor flesh. You have no idea what you're doing. You've got the pressure of the world. Now, it might be your parents. It might be your grandma. It might be your granddad. It might be an uncle. It might be you. Somebody is going to put you under the pressure to achieve above average things that all of us have, because none of us would have been admitted to practice. And that haunts you. That sort of being different. You know, I went through uni, I didn't drink a drop of alcohol. To this day, I'm a very light drinker at best. My local liquor store's worst nightmare. You know, if I buy anything, it's usually for clients. And I was invited to a lovely dinner by a client last night, and he offered me a glass of whiskey. I had a sip. I'm not a big whiskey drinker. He knows that, but it was a gesture of friendship. And I went as far as the gesture, and that's it. I was an unusual person. I didn't have the background that many people had. You know, by many people's idea of how you should grow up to be successful, I should be a failure. I should be lying in the gutter with a needle in my arm. And I haven't done any of these things. I'm the child of you know, my mum and dad divorced when I was 5. My mum raised me. It was an interesting upbringing, but I always backed myself. And every time I did, I had that self-doubt that Stefanie was talking about, where I go, am I good enough? So for every one step I took, I then took 10. And having come to Australia not speaking English when I was almost 17, or not enough English to hold a conversation apart from, hello, I'm from Germany. When I went to law school, I thought I was the only one who truly didn't understand what was going on in terms of the subjects. And it probably took me 2 years to work out that nobody understood what was going on. It wasn't a matter of language. It was a matter of, this is your brain being broken down, and you're relearning to walk. You're relearning to talk. You're relearning to think and structure arguments, which is why as lawyers, we have conversations that seem to be so asymmetrical to conversations that the mainstream is holding. We can put things differently. We can gather information differently. So the takeaway point, I think, on that segment for me is self-doubt is healthy, because it will always be the thing to review. It can be a destructive force. And again, this idea that we need to show some self-love, because when we care for our clients, when we care for our image, when we care for this and care for that, the one person we're not caring for is us. We are, through our achievements and through the recognition we take away. But we need to be good at caring. Now, the Scandinavians have a thing called hygge, which is basically enough. And that's why Scandinavians don't live like Russian oligarchs. They get to a point where that's it. You know, I've got this, I don't need any more. And as I get older, I'm increasingly of the view that there is some merit to that, because you've taken from the world what you need, you're comfortable, and it's okay. You know, you don't need more. And you have that capacity to look back. You're still a professional. You can still do all the things you need to do, but you don't need to continuously keep pushing. So there's my perspective on that.
You know, this discussion is so incredibly, impactful for me. What I think stands out really is that I'm watching two people who've been in the profession for, at least 3 times, 4 times the amount of time that I've been in it, still asking the exact
You
same.
keep talking like that, Sadhana. I'm coming for you and running you down with my car. Then I'm going to back over your body and hit you again. Okay.
Well, these threats of violence have no impact on me because I am enough, and I think that's really the point that I take away from this. It's so, almost cathartic for me to see that 2 people who have all this experience still ask themselves the same questions that we are asking as young lawyers. Am I enough? And not just as young lawyers. This discussion really isn't just about young people or young lawyers, but all lawyers across the board. And also, apart from the question of whether I am enough or not, it's am I a fake? The imposter syndrome that Steph was talking about earlier. It is so meaningful for us to go into this conversation because it's a question that we ask at all stages of our lives, and it's so important to just take a step back to say, it's okay, even if I'm not, I am enough. I am good enough. Even if I don't know this, it doesn't mean that I am not enough. It just means I need to go and learn about it, or I need to redraft something. If the partner doesn't like the draft, that's all right. I just have things to learn and I need to go and learn it. And if, the other takeaway that I have, and I want to go into this very quickly really, is the sense of purpose that the both of you have. And I feel it very strongly because you can see that both of you are very passionate about what it is that you do, and it really is the law in different ways. One is, transactional practice, and the other is really, advocacy and going to court. But the reality is both of you are extremely passionate and feel very strongly about what you do. And I feel that too. And I think the difference really is that even when you feel very strongly for what it is you do, even if you're in a good working environment, even if you have the most supportive bosses and colleagues, you can still be burnt out. And I feel that very strongly because, I'm looking at Steph and how you've shared with us that, you've worked the late nights, you've also done, the same kind of work. And I completely agree. Stress, when you were an associate versus stress when I am associate, it's exactly the same thing. It's the same human emotion that we feel regardless of the workload. But I think the biggest takeaway for me is that you feel stress even in good environments, and you need to deal with that stress in healthy ways. And I think that's the next topic that is up for discussion. How do we deal with stress in healthy ways? I think there are very few, close to no studies done on the depression that lawyers face in Singapore. I think overseas there are quite a few, and the statistics show actually about 10%, 10 to 15% of lawyers tend to feel clinical, or rather have shown signs of clinical depression. And lawyers are generally, as a profession, 3 times more likely to suffer from clinical depression compared to professions from other occupations. And when I say clinical depression, this does not include suffering from mild anxiety, chronic anxiety, severe anxiety, other forms of depression. And so the question really is, how do we deal with this? First of all, how do we spot the signs? And second of all, what can we do at an early stage?
How do we spot this? Oh, sorry, Dirk, you want to go first?
in terms of the pressure, one thing to remember is that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And again, moderation in that pressure. Now, I've had the privilege over the years of working with absolutely brilliant minds, including Stefanie's husband, who I've once had the pleasure of briefing on a Singaporean question. But as lawyers, we have to back ourselves. So I've run a number of cases where I was told this is not going to fly. And where literally the partner from another law firm would ring me the night before the hearing. And I remember one particular conversation with a partner from a law firm, with a much larger law firm, who basically started the conversation by saying, well, Dirk, in a firm your size, you wouldn't be doing this sort of work very often. So let me explain how it works. And we went to the hearing the next day and we won. And I felt like ringing her back going, you know, which part did I not understand? There's an injunction I once did, which I'm particularly proud of, which was retrospective, or it spoke to retrospective event. And there was no precedent. And I was almost laughed out of court by our opposition. And we won it. I won it. And sometimes you do things where you are completely on your own and you have to back yourself. And that's a tremendous challenge. And that's a tremendous point of pressure. But you have to realize that you are mortal. You have to realize that failure is an option in these things. You have to come to terms with your defeats as much as anything else. Now, just because I worked in a smaller firm didn't mean that over the years I didn't end up cultivating an excellent client base. And I'm very, very proud of the client base we still have and we've always had. But that would also mean that on one occasion I was walking down the street, there was an important matter actually happening in Singapore. I spoke to my client, things over there weren't managed, not by Stefanie's firm, of course, but by another firm in a way that I thought was curious. The client said, can you come up and see me? So this was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I jumped on the plane at 1 a.m. I was there at 7 in the morning or thereabouts. I attended the meeting. My client dropped me off at 7 o'clock at night. I was home at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and back at my desk at 10 o'clock the next morning. And they're the sort of things I used to do. I used to pack everything in. I talked to a former secretary of mine who would go, you used to come into the office and say, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And the thing that nobody can do, that's next. And we'll do it. We'll show them how it's done. And I enjoyed that. But these things need to be contained. They are, you know, you can only do so much for so long. And I say to those that I love, and I think one of them is actually listening at the moment, life is a marathon. It's not a race. And what I've learned from the people who have this incredible brilliance over the years, you know, we're talking people who were the Chief Justices and so forth, is that they are quite honest about you're not going to win every case. You will need a break and have a work-life balance. I know one very, very senior barrister who has an absolutely insane workload, but he will take a section of the year off, the entire section.
I think, Dirk, just to, I mean, the point that you're making really is to know when to stop. I like the word you use, which is to contain. But I think the question is, how do we spot these signs early and then stop it?
And I think mirror to yourself.
We've come, well, there's a question that's just come in, which is how do we overcome self-doubt and performance anxieties at any point of our life? How do we not simply give up and run away?
Yes. Let me go in there a bit. How do we spot burnout? So I went through a period when I woke up in the morning, my body was all right, but I didn't want to get out of bed. I don't know whether that's a kind of depression or a kind of burnout, but that's what was happening to me. I realized that after 2 or 3 days, there was nothing that was going on in my life that would otherwise require that. So I realized I was burnout. There were other times when my brain just went to a place where if any work came in, if a new matter came in, a new email came in, it wanted to scream. You know, there's a silent scream that goes on your head. I realized that. That's when I realized I had burnout. So I said to my partners, I need to take a month off because I'm no good to anybody like this. I'm trying very hard to get through the work so that I can get it off my table because the screaming is going on in my head. So when I say we need to own it, I mean you need to recognize that that's the mirror that Dirk's talking about. But those are the specific, for me at least, that's how it manifested in my headspace.
So I suppose in order to address that question, how do we not simply give up and run away? I think that feeling of running away is something that you need to address. It
You need to
points
give
to
yourself a timeout, basically. You need to take the pressure off, release valve. You need to be able to put up your hand and say, guys, this isn't doing it for me right now. I need to take some time out to fix myself, whatever that might be. And then digital detox, if that's what's necessary. I find digital detox very stressful, actually, because then you keep wondering what else is happening in your plate. So I made it a point to tell my secretary, these sorts of emails I'm not going to look at. You need to curate for me. You will then be the person who then decides what I need to look at. I think in life, what is helpful is to have, and I tell my juniors this, it's to have a tag team, somebody in your office whom you work closely with, who understands you. So I would say to them, okay, if you're an A-type personality, maybe find somebody who's going to be able to help you do that. Go to them in the room to say, I was feeling really yucky about how I did in that meeting. You tell me how I did. Give me the truth. Somebody you can trust to tell you the truth. Okay. Somebody whose judgments you trust, because you can't trust yourself. At that point of time, you're just feeling, I'm so shit, I can't do anything now. The worst professional time in my life was when I did an IPO, and I think this was Singapore's only ever stop order on the prospectus, which is like the worst thing to happen, right? There was an argument that my clients had failed to disclose certain things. And so of course you take it very personally and you feel very, very, personally responsible for something like that. That was the worst thing. And you don't get a clearance from this. Every other week, the regulators pull you up and ask you more questions about your process. It just felt like it was dragging on and on and on. At least in court, you just lose and that's it, But this just kept going on and you just don't know how much longer it's going to go on for. And I just felt terrible. And I didn't dare take on any work after that because it was like, what have I put this up to? Because it just felt like I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't realize I'd done something wrong, but clearly I didn't get the result that I was supposed to get. And so I don't trust my own judgment anymore. So what you do is you have somebody who says to you, listen, Steph, you screwed up this, but this is what you can do well. Focus on this. Somebody who is then your voice of reason. I think it's very good to have a partner in life, and it doesn't need to be a romantic partner. It can be somebody whom you tag team with in your life that I think is very useful. And people don't realize that these relationships are important. I think part of the stress of today is that we've all been working from home for the last 2 years. We don't necessarily have those relationships that we can count on. Somebody to sort of take the load off. Somebody comes to your room and says, have a pack of Doritos because I know you've had a really rough day, babe.
I think what I'm hearing from both of you is really there are different ways of reflecting on yourself. So Dirk, you were saying, hold the mirror up, do some self-reflection, some analysis. Yeah. And I think Stefanie, you're saying it, actually it could also be useful to get someone who's looking at you to give you feedback. And I think those are two very interesting approaches towards really evaluating yourself and deciding whether or not you need stress. The other takeaway point I got from that was really in the little indications that you are feeling stressed. So for example, not being able to get out of bed, feeling dread when you receive an email, tightness of the chest, being unable to breathe, not for me, sometimes it is not wanting to pick up the phone when I get a call. Sometimes also I get very triggered by the Teams ringtone, which tended to have a rung out very often over the COVID period when we were all stuck at home and we couldn't get out. And so every time the Teams call, sort of the ringtone sort of chimed, I started getting very anxious because then I started thinking, oh no, there's more work coming in, And so I think with these small things, you can get some kind of indication that you actually do need to start taking a break and seeking help. But in line with that, I feel that sometimes when you take a break, exactly like what Stefanie said, you can actually feel more stress because then you lose the very thing that defines you. So for example, I used to really get lost in my work and I got off on the high that I used to get from finishing submissions, getting the point, going to court and then presenting in front of judges and judges agreeing with your points, and then your clients telling you good job, well done. And you get off on that. And so when you suddenly take that away from you for a month or so, I think sometimes I guess the loss of that experience or not really feeling that high can be detrimental as well. The other thing that I found also is that I can't be reevaluating my life purpose on a daily basis. And I think that that's a conversation that we have at important milestones, but on a daily basis, the stresses that I face and things that would encourage me, are there any strategies that either of you would have for the people listening in? And I say this because we've talked about some very deep and meaningful things today, knowing your life's purpose, reflecting on yourself, picking up on, things that are troubling you, swapping jobs even if one doesn't satisfy you, changing your work environment. But I don't think this is a luxury that many can afford. And I think secondly, not everyone also has the time to sort of sit and reflect on their life purpose, every time they feel stressed out, which could possibly be daily. So would you have any strategies for coping that you could recommend?
I do a list of things I need to do. And then when number 19 on that list comes out and I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't do 19 things right now. And you're doing number 2 and then you're thinking number 17 is bearing down on me. I tell myself, I actually recite the words to myself. You can only do one thing at a time. So just do the one thing now. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I stand, I close the door and I shout at the world, okay, loud and long, if that's what you need. Sometimes I walk into somebody's room and say, babe, we're going shopping. I need 20 minutes and we're just going to go shopping, buy some cheap clothes from the arcade and whatever it takes to get out that moment. I also keep copious amounts of alcohol in my office, not because I drink, because I'm like you, Dirk. I drink half a tipple and I'm done. But it helps to sort of, you break it out in the evening, that and the chocolate makes everybody feel better. You need to find little de-stressing mechanisms for yourself. And if it's what you need, even if the whole world is shouting at you, you need half an hour out just because your brain needs a break, then take it.
The worst, sorry, Stefanie, I didn't want to cut you.
Yeah, no, that was it.
I was going to say the worst thing a strong person can do is surround themselves with weak people. Now, that sounds like a brutal thing, but I just want to qualify what I mean by that, because I said, hold a mirror to yourself. And that's really a lie. I think Stefanie gave a better, more sophisticated answer to that in that she said, surround yourself with the right people. If you are who you are and you're a type A and you're achieving things and you are surrounded by people that continuously pat you on the back and will not pick you up when your behavior changes, when you're feeling tired, when your work starts to slip, when you're starting to grizzle at people and all the rest of it, then I think you run a greater risk. Now, that self-awareness needs to be, I think, unpacked and broken down into a few things. The first one is, it's okay to feel overwhelmed, because if you didn't have an emotional range to send those signals, there's actually something very, very wrong with you. And there's a great book called The Good Psychopath, and the effectiveness of psychopaths in certain situations. But really, I think for effective lawyers, the best lawyers I know are actually people who have a high degree of empathy, who will moderate what their clients will do. So they are not sympathetic lawyers, but they'll have empathy and they'll invest themselves 100%, including keeping pace with the file. When I used to teach self-defense, I would say to my students, I go, if you do not feel fear, you're a fool, because fear will inform your decisions. It's the thing that keeps you from standing in the middle of the road, not yielding to a truck. And the outcome of that, we all know. Now, so having people who hold that mirror to you is really important. And if you have a forceful personality, you actually need to bring people into your life to say no, but you will need to teach yourself. And you will need to take breaks regularly. Now, my dad was very successful, but one thing he would do is take 6 weeks holidays a year. People go, that's insane. Where can I find you? And he goes, nowhere, I'm gone. And he would walk out and he would come back quite relaxed. We should also draw a distinction between the grades of mental health. So there's feeling stress. Everybody feels stress. That's the good stress is the fuel that moves us forward. But it's when it sounds in destructive behaviors. And I'm not talking about the bit of chocolate. I very much relate to that because I always, you know, I'm a big guy. I go and give a presentation. People go, here is your bottle of wine. And I say, why are you giving me alcohol? And then sometimes I see the box of chocolates that they tend to give to the females. And I just go, really? I'll swap. They can have the bottle of wine. I'll have the box of chocolates. But so those things, those rewards are also important, but again, in moderation. Now, some people say do yoga. If you put me in a room with people and I have to be quiet and sit there and do something slowly, I'm probably 10 minutes in, ready to kill everybody in that room. So for me, that doesn't work. I need to actually still go to the gym and pick up heavy weights, which is what I used to do when I was younger. And I love that crushing feeling, and I love that feeling of struggle. And half an hour of that is very good for me. There are studies on people who are now basically excused from going to meditation because it doesn't help them. They're not people who would do well in meditation. And it's okay to say that to yourself. You know, I used to drag myself off to golf days, and I hate golf. I truly loathe golf, and you know, don't go. Holidays, really important. Mentorship. The greatest gift a senior practitioner can give a junior is to create an environment, not one where the junior slacks off, but one where the junior feels safe enough to achieve. Because the sooner you expose people to success and responsibility, the better it is. Now, the Ritz-Carlton has the golden rules, and Steve Jobs would send his managers in to train at the Ritz-Carlton. When they go through the golden rules, the most important one is not just the courtesy of how they address each other, because it's the ladies and gentlemen of the Ritz-Carlton, but it is also the idea that every employee takes responsibility for every part of the business. And
Dirk, I'm going to have to jump in at this point because we have a lot of questions that are coming in at this point. But what I'm hearing from the both of you is really to be honest with yourself about what you need and to not feel apologetic for taking what you need. So if you don't like to do yoga, that's fine. You can choose something else. If you need to take a break, you know, even if it's a 20-minute break, take it. And these are small things that work for both of you. And it's really about the individual finding what works for them. I want to jump into the questions that we're getting now. They go into how much stress that the lawyer ought to take on, how much of the client's emotions that the lawyer ought to take on. So the second question is, do the panelists see their role as lawyers extending to informal counseling of stressed out clients, or is that a path best not taken? If I can just, add to this, I see myself doing this a lot, especially in my line of work. I'm purely a, pro bono criminal defense lawyer, and I deal with a lot of young offenders, and all I really want to do is just counsel them back onto the right track. I just want to get them in and just stop them from doing all of these things, and change their lives and, tell them, look, any problems, just call me, I'll be there. But I hold myself back from doing a lot of these things because I realize, first of all, that it may not necessarily be the best way forward for the young offender who needs to take responsibility of his life and, make smarter decisions. And the only way they do that is if they embrace their life decisions and their choices and take responsibility. But I think the question really is intended at the both of you to ask you what your views are about whether, informal counseling of stressed out clients is a path that, a lawyer should embark on.
Short answer for you, but very short answer for you. Yes, we should, because I make all my clients my friends, okay? And I don't just look at their legal problems, because I look at the overall issue and I try to talk to them as a friend. The important line to draw for yourself is don't make their problems your own. Don't take them home with you. Don't identify too much with their problems. See yourself as somebody who's helping, not somebody who's stepping into their life. I think that's where you draw the line.
Dirk?
I share Stefanie's outlook towards the practice, because most of our clients are referrals. Basically, all our clients are referrals, and many clients I've had for many, many years. The key to all of this is one word, I think, and that's objectivity. It's even in our conduct rules, and that is, if you put yourself in a situation where your judgment is clouded, then you become a danger to the system, including saying to the clients you can't do it. And you used to see less so these days, these unfortunate cases in the 1990s and early 2000s where practitioners would witness documents without people being present in the room and so forth. And there are a number of factors at play here. And one of them was the client being overbearing, so not drawing boundaries because they're too aggressive. And the other one is familiarity. You know me, of course my wife signed this, just witness this for me. So this is a small example. I don't know how things are structured in Singapore, but I try to make sure that I, as a practitioner, and I'm a sole practitioner, build a very strong network of people I can call, barristers in particular, and go, I have this situation, what should I do? And I call them stop and think moments, where you actually develop a discipline within yourself to go, hang on, what do I do here? And sometimes it's just having a chat about things you actually know. But that reassurance, I think, is really important.
Yep. I want to move on quickly to the next question. How do you deal with the expectations others have of you outside of work? Once people know you're an accomplished lawyer, they may expect you to be a certain way or deliver on many fronts. Do you really get to let your hair down and just be yourself, safe and relaxed in your own thoughts? I love this question because I get it all the time, especially when I take a Grab to the state courts, and then the uncle will be like, and I'll be my black and white uncle will be like, good lawyer, I got this problem, and then they go into it. And at that point in time, when you just want to, I use my Grab rides to really just unwind and switch off. Getting into these questions can sometimes be very difficult for me because I don't really want to think about legal concepts and principles. I think also in a private capacity as well, when you tell people that you're a lawyer, people tend to view you a bit differently. Sometimes there are some preconceived notions of lawyers being very aggressive, very unnecessarily conflicting. We may want to argue for the sake of arguing. My husband has that view of me. So I think that is something that comes up very often for me. So maybe if I could just hear from Steph, how do you deal with the expectations that others have of you as a lawyer?
That you just have to do you lah. I mean, okay, look at me. Nobody is going to look at me and think she's not who she is, right? So I have that difficulty. I can't walk into Raffles Place without getting recognized, unfortunately. So my associates refuse to go with me these days. They're like, the other day I was pumping petrol and I said hello to the guys in the next lot, and one of the young men said to me, I know who you are. So yeah, just be yourself. And if you don't want to talk to people, just don't talk to people.
Actually, as a follow-up question to that, what about how do you feel that you're perceived as a female lawyer? Are you perceived any differently?
I've never been a male lawyer, sweetie, so I'm afraid I can't comment on that. I think the female-male lawyer thing is a bigger problem in your world where you stride the courtroom. Okay. Right. I think it's much worse because you have to dress like a poorer version of the male lawyer. He gets to be powerful in his suit and his tie. You have to look like a manager at an Imperial Treasure restaurant. Okay. So that's one of the reasons I don't practice litigation, because I'm just like, why should I be a second-class citizen over there? I would feel that because, I sort of have an aesthetic thing going on here. And all my female colleagues, when they come back from court, they will change into their brightly colored clothes because then I don't want to feel I have to be dressed like this in a uniform all the time. I just be yourself. And sometimes yourself just doesn't want to be a lawyer. Just don't talk about it then if you don't want to.
Dirk, what do you think?
I'm so with Stefanie on the be yourself. The saddest thing I see these days is queues of 500 people to try and get into a shop so they can all be the same. And in areas of collecting, you'll see that where the love has gone out of the thing. People used to collect quirky stuff and then keep it all to themselves, and then their friends would see it and nobody else would know until they die, and then the auction house would get it and people go, what's that? There was a charm to this. We have so much, I think the younger generations in particular have so much pressure on themselves. I think you should lead a life like this. If 500 people go and buy it, buy the thing that they would never buy. Be that other person, because you will need to build that persona to make it in law. You will need to be the, you know, the odd-shaped peg. You do need to have that, because if you are a sheeple, I think you'll hate law more than anything. So do that, embrace that, because clients also want authenticity. You know, everybody, when they walk in, I mean, how many times do you go to a professional, blah, 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 will do this for you, and then it's something else. If you can be authentic and have that strong product, and people go, wow, everything that they said they've delivered on, they've turned it around within time, within the fee expectation, they've managed this well, you know, that's your referral base. That's why I almost don't want clients from the outside, because I want the culture of our clients.
I just have one last question before we round up. And this is such an important question. Is there a stigma against counseling or treatment? And I think maybe if we could each take like 30 seconds to sort of address this, whether there is a stigma against seeking help.
There shouldn't be. I think there probably is still a little bit, if I was totally honest, but there shouldn't be. And
right.
we should get there. Whether you are getting help, I think what is important is to own the degree of your illness. So for example, if I felt that I had a mental condition which meant that I wasn't going to be able to exercise good judgment when it came to the law, I should then remove myself from practice until I was in a better place. But if it's just helping me get out of bed in the morning, it's helping me feel better or to deal with the personal stress, then that's just on me to get the right treatment that I want.
Dirk?
Yes, there is stigma. It is completely stupid that there is a stigma. Anyone who stigmatizes another person for going through the process is a muppet. And if they have a problem with it, they can give me a call. The thing in particular amongst the senior practitioners is that we should all work to retaining people. That works on the senior end as well as the junior end. And if we cannot have an ear for those that need it, in particular to prevent lapses that are harmful to the profession. Singapore had an experience where a senior lawyer struck his employee. I saw that, and the video was quite shocking. I was actually amazed there was a video within the firm. But, you know, those things shouldn't happen. They're bad for everybody, including the employee, the practitioner. The public's perception of us is terrible. It's like your car, maintain it.
I just thank you both so much for sharing all of your insights. You know, some of it got really personal, and I'm so glad that we were so open with sharing all of these things. We are at the, you know, last lap, and I just wanted to ask the both of you, how should we as older or younger lawyers deal with the scars that we have received from practicing in an era where perhaps bosses, clients have been less than forgiving? How would you propose we do that? In 30 seconds, perhaps.
Scars are almost impossible to get rid of. I think acknowledge, manage, bring in external help. This idea to make you stronger is rubbish. There's no such thing as post-traumatic I got stronger syndrome. So acknowledge it, it's there, the science backs you, you know, love yourself, seek help, and as professionals, let's extend the courtesy and the decency and the humanity to our fellow practitioners to see this managed properly so we retain them.
Actually, your boss, if they don't, okay, so what I would do is I see my practice as my own. It's something that I own for myself. Everything that I've done, which has been bad or terrible or so-so, I should learn from. And if I learn from it, then it's not been a bad experience. It's something that has paid off for me. And my experience will always be my own. What I learn from it will always be my own. And if your boss is too stupid to see you improving from that, then you need to find a better boss, frankly.
And with that, I am calling the session to a close, and I will tell you my biggest takeaway from this session, apart from the fact that both of you are such amazing people who have openly shared, you know, some of the most important lessons that I've learned so far. First of all, it's really that you can be all of this, image and perception that the public sees you as, but inside it can be a very different story. You pursue different interests, and that's okay. Not all of that needs to be up on display for everybody to see, but it is necessary for you to maintain that in order to be healthy mentally. The second most important lesson that I've learned really is that, it's important to hold true to your life's purpose and to identify when you don't, identify with that purpose anymore. And it's okay, because as life goes on, things change, and you must just keep checking in regularly to make sure that, that's still what you want to do in your life. The third most important thing really is to have people around you who you trust to check in with you and to tell you, pick up on markers, that could signify that, you're feeling very stressed out or you need to take a break. And the last thing really is to seek help when you need it. There ought not to be a stigma against it. And there are so many avenues we can all turn to at this point, with different counseling services opening up. I believe the Law Society also has some options available for lawyers to take up to get counseling. And I think it's so important. One key thing I want to say as well is that the younger generation, and I would consider myself a part of it, we've been labeled many things. We're called the strawberry generation, we are sometimes called snowflakes, but I think the one thing that I take away is just how resistant we are to most of the challenges that have been thrown to us. I think we're also the generation that's gone through the most change. And I think I would say we are also braver at this point in our lives to make important decisions, to stand up for ourselves, to say we need mental help. We need to have these conversations about mental health. And I think most of us are more willing to engage in these kinds of conversations. And I'm happy and excited to be a part of this as well.
Very quickly,
yes.
If anybody wants more specific, they need more specific mentoring, etc. Sometimes people may not have had their questions answered. They can hit me up on LinkedIn, okay?
Definitely. I'm sure, Dirk, I'm sure you can find Dirk on LinkedIn as well. He does post quite a number of articles. I've been following him as well. So I think both of them would be more than happy to field your questions.
Very much so.
We hope you found our webinar useful today. Your feedback will help us to make future webinars more relevant and useful to you. Now, once this webinar ends, you will receive a survey on your browser, and we will appreciate your feedback on today's session. We thank you very much, Stefanie and Dirk, for spending the evening with us and for your invaluable insights. With that, and on behalf of Law Society Pro Bono Services, we thank you all for joining us today, and we hope you had a great evening. Goodbye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
See you.